In this episode, we're going to continue on with our third episode into China's turmoil and Evergrande's debt crisis. And I'm going to introduce you to one of my favourite YouTubers, and that would have to be Graham Stephan. And we're just going to step through his critique of this situation that's going on, this turmoil in China, and I'll give you my thoughts of what he's got to his points of view is. So let's get into it.
Guys here, so I had another video that was scheduled to post today, but that could wait because we have to talk about what's happening throughout the entire markets and the severity of the Evergrande fallout, not only in terms of how this impacts you, but also the entire financial system around the world as one of the largest property developers defaults on $300 billion worth of debt.
So Graham, Steph, and I both of the same opinion that this embattled company in China, Evergrande, has this huge amount of debt, $300 million of debt. And Graham goes on to speak about how this amount of debt basically should be the debt of a country and not a company, and how this could possibly have gotten to this point. Um, yeah, we'll continue on.
Yes, you heard me correctly. That is a B, as in be sure to keep watching. I think most people don't fully understand the severity of what's begun to unfold, or how this was allowed to carry on to such an extreme level before getting to the point of no return. So here's everything you need to know summarized in the next 8 minutes, and then we'll talk about the potential impact this could have on all of us over the next few days, weeks, and months. And of course, if you appreciate all this information,
So I'd have to say, I love Graham's videos. As you can see, he does a far better job than what I do. He's very enthusiastic, and the information that he's got is very clear and concise. Um, and I'd have to agree with what he's saying so far. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this video as well. Um, and uh, and whether you think this crisis is going to develop into something further. But we'll continue on.
information being condensed down to just the facts, it does help me out a lot if you hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. And also, if you're brand new here, feel free to subscribe. It's totally free to do, and I post a new video every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday about investing, personal finance.
Do yourself a favor, go and view Graham's show, and I'll leave it down below. Have a listen to his episode. But let's get back into it.
Operations, finance, and the health industry. Their core business is buying up empty plots of land and then transforming those into large residential structures. Although over time, the company also diversified their business across bottled water, electric vehicles, theme parks, a streaming service, and even, wait for it, a soccer team. Obviously,
so as you can see there, as I mentioned in the previous video, they're across real estate, bottled water, and even soccer. It's funny that Graham said that as well. So you've got to ask yourself the question, has this company, what Peter Lynch would say is diversified? Have they gone into other areas, and has it been a mistake going to these other areas? Is this the reason why they've gotten into trouble? Well, possibly, possibly not. But as you can see, they have gone off onto other tangents with their business structure, and could be part of the reason as to why they're in the situation. May or may not be.
that's a big operation that needs a lot of moving parts, and as a result, Forbes noted that they had more than 125,000 employees around the world. But there was also a growing problem, and that would be debt. In order to pay for the cost of building these residential skyscrapers, they have to borrow money. Most of that is generated from large banks, institutional investors, bondholders, or even home buyers who agree to loan them money in exchange for a down payment or a modest interest rate for a few years until eventually the project is complete. Now, in a normal market where Evergrande could sell the newly built properties for a profit, paying off their debt wouldn't be a problem. Although unfortunately, the real estate market in China began to see a sudden shift that would lead to the perfect storm, causing everything to come crumbling down. Throughout 2018 and 19,
So this stems back to what I was saying in the previous episode. Is this another 2008 debt crisis, like in the US, the global financial crisis, and there is some talk that this is another, um, well, I guess China crisis. China's basically having its opportunity to have its own crisis. Um, and is this real estate situation unfolding over there? Is it a bubble? Is it, some are even saying it's a bit of a Ponzi scheme? But we'll continue on with what Graham's got to say.
China experienced what many people would call a real estate housing bubble boom, as citizens preferred to invest their money in housing as a safety net, causing the real estate market to increase double digits year over year. On top of that, the urbanization of rural China, combined with the societal pressure to own a home, caused a massive relocation to cities who promised greater earning potential and more opportunities, thereby further driving up the market. In fact, China was building 5 times as many homes as both America and Europe combined. And still the supply was so low that some cities resorted to a lottery system that would decide who gets to buy a home, some with the chance of being picked as low as 1 in 60. But there was also another problem. People believed the housing market was such a good investment that individuals would buy anything they can, because even if they never lived there or kept it empty, they could always
Um, does this sort of remind you of something? It's a bit of it to me. It's the beginning of the end, when there are people purchasing property over there in China, and they're not even living it; they're just buying it on the pretense that it's gonna keep going up, and no one's even living in it. So yeah, they're in it. It's not a good situation, but we'll carry on.
sell it for more in the future for a profit. It didn't matter how much it would cost either. Some individuals would pay as high as 23 times their annual income to buy a home, with their mortgage
23 times that, and could you imagine that? 23. So if the average person's on 100,000 a year, they're paying 23 times their annual income. That's just incredible. But yeah,
payment taking up more than half of their gross take-home pay. That led to a 22% vacancy rate throughout China as homebuyers bought second properties for an investment just outside limits without property restrictions, right as the government stepped in to buy surplus inventory to keep the market stable. In addition to that, the
so I'm just going to speed it up to this other section down here. So here you can see what could go wrong. So Graham's going to explain it for us.
anywhere else, making property developers a lot of money in the process. So in short, there's a societal pressure to use home ownership as a sign for prosperity, combined with very few other places to invest your money, which led to rampant speculation across real estate values that can only go on for so long until eventually this happens, as I'm about to explain. Evergrande took on $300 billion worth of debt to continue building real estate, and this worked as long as they were able to roll that over to the next project. But when the coronavirus lockdown hit, everything was stalled. Supply chains were backed up, material costs went through the roof, labor was hard to come by, and as a result, their operations slowed down massively. But you know what does not slow down? Their loan payments. Investors, lenders, and
So this tells me this is to do with the global financial crisis, and it seems that they haven't been able to service their debt during this period of COVID. Now, the other part that I really wanted to for you to see is just how this impacts the US. So we'll just have a look at this section here. This is the part that I wanted to address from the previous episode. So we'll just head over there.
but in terms of how this might impact you, here's what you need to know. Now, even though it's easy to think,
Oh, that's just the Chinese real estate market. That's not gonna affect me. I'm safe over here.
that's not exactly true. As Evergrande raised capital, they did so by selling off those loans to institutions like Vanguard, BlackRock, HSBC, and Goldman Sachs, who took those loans and then packaged them up to everyday investors. Now, it's important to mention that
So as you can see there, um, it seems that there is some exposure there to the US there with these loans in the form of bonds, so high yield bonds, and it seems that some companies such as BlackRock, for example, is one that Graham has pointed out. They've taken on some exposure to this debt, and but as Graham's going to mention too, the amount of debt that they've taken on from these bonds is minuscule in terms of the worth of some of these US companies. So he's going to put it in better terms than what I can.
Even though these companies have hundreds of millions of dollars tied up in Evergrande, that's still just a drop in the bucket compared to their overall portfolio worth. And when you consider that a company like BlackRock has $9 trillion under management, suddenly a $400 million exposure to Evergrande is the exact same as someone else with $100 losing 1/2 of 1 cent. And
So perfectly put across there by Graham. But yeah, so in Graham's view there, from the research that he's conducted, the risk is quite minimal, and that's what I was alluding to there in the previous video. So it's probably going to come down to the slowdown in commodities, but there would be some risk there from what I can see there, because there is exposure there in these companies that are investing and taking on this debt. Um, but it's a very small amount, as Graham has mentioned there.
regardless, Chinese companies do hold exposure to the US market, and when they need money, it would make sense that they sell off assets to raise capital, and that would put downward pressure on the market.
So as Graham's mentioned there, so this is partly the reason that has caused the US market to drop, and that's due to the basically trying to raise some sell off their assets in the US, and by selling that off, that's put pressure on the US markets, and that's probably the reason why the market in the US has dropped too, so they can raise that capital there and pay off this debt. So that sort of explains things a bit further. But I'm going to leave this link to Graham's video in the down below. But I just want to show you this other article here that I was looking at, and that's around which funds own Evergrande bonds. And it's saying here in this news article, UBS, HSBC, and BlackRock have been accumulating Evergrande bonds over the past few months, according to Morningstar Direct. And they've seen few funds adding to Evergrande between July and August 2021, given the widespread of attractive valuations. And here's a list. So Fidelity Asian High Yield Fund, UBS Asian High Yield Fund, HSBC Global Investments, PIMCO High Yield Bond, BlackRock High Yield Bond. So these are the companies that have that exposure there. But as Graham mentioned, that the exposure level is low in terms of these funds total wealth. So thought I'd just point that out to you because it was something that wasn't discussed in the previous episode. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this topic, and I'll keep you up to date. There'll be another episode. So thanks for listening.